Hi, everyone. Welcome to Creative Futures 2021, which is organized by the Center of International Trade, Expositions and Missions, or CITEM, in partnership with the Arts and Culture and Creative Industries Bloc, the Creative Economy Council of the Philippines, KUMU, and the Film Development Council of the Philippines. Welcome, guys.
We are Quirk, Ramon, and Mel of Enslate, a movie and streaming podcast powered by Globe Studios. And this is TRESE, from indie comic to online streaming, a roundtable discussion and watch party of key episode 1 scenes with TRESE co-creator Budget Tan and executive producer and writer Tanya Yuson.
TRESE has only been out for a few weeks, and already there's this wealth of memes, fan edits, thirst tweets, numerous discussions online. Did you guys expect this kind of reaction?
In a word, no.
Although we should have.
Well, I guess from the comic book, right? The Facebook group is pretty strong with the memes, and the OG fans have been doing it for a while. But we hope people would like it. We weren't expecting this creativity to burst forth from people for, after watching it. And we're really happy about it, actually, because it's so entertaining.
And organic.
Yeah,
Not
really.
paid.
Not at all. I logged on to TikTok the other day because someone said, you should check it out. Mick and Zig said, I was like, wow, it's wild. It's like, there's a girl who basically, she's like, the title is practicing to be Malixi's wife. And all this is this girl doing horse sounds. Just like,
oh my
wow.
All right.
You should be on TikTok pala.
Time to download TikTok.
It's
Budget.
wild.
Do you have favorite memes or virality, whatever?
So far, it's the Becky.
Oh my God, I love that.
Becky
I
dub.
love that so much.
So every single dub just keeps getting better and better. So far, this is the best one yet, and it would be great to see a whole episode if they could. Do that. I don't know if they can sustain that, but that would be great to see.
Yeah, Kilby po is the new Kombawan. Kilby po.
Parang siya maging Game of Thrones.
I love Game of Thrones also. Oh my gosh.
It's also interesting to see the range of the memes, especially when it crosses generations, because there are some TikToks for the Zillennials, and then there are some conting Gen Xers trying to tie it with the older things that they're reminded of because of the show.
And Ramon, don't forget the Viber messages from the seniors saying that
Yes.
you have to watch TRESE.
Support
Because
TRESE.
the son of Batch Saints ko, Batch 60.
Batch 1964.
Yes, it has cross generations.
It really
has.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it's funny because like even my senior citizen parents were asking me like, what's TRESE? Because we're getting these messages now to watch and support Filipino. And then I had to explain, you can watch it, but it's horror, which my mom does not watch. So parang, okay, well, maybe I'll just leave it running na lang.
Para may ma-count yung view.
Support.
That's amazing.
Which is pretty awesome. Please tell them thank you.
Let's pivot a bit to budget. Now, could you share basically the moment that you heard that Netflix was interested in the property?
It was all through Tanya. So maybe Tanya has the front row seat to all of that. But yeah, it was again when Tanya was keeping us updated on their meetings, and so it was I keep saying that it sometimes feels anticlimactic because I was always envisioning that Hollywood moment about the phone rings, Tanya picks it up, looks at me, and she goes, "We got it!" And that didn't happen at all. She just sent me a message, "You got it," and I looked at the phone and said, "Yeah," and then I went back to work after that. But no, because we were, as far as I remember, Tanya, it was month by month you were like already hinting that it was getting closer to that until finally it was here it is, and they said yes. But maybe you can talk more about that one.
I mean, like as Budget said, there's never, and even in Hollywood, they're like, there's never the champagne call. It's always a struggle to kind of get to either set something up or close the deal. So you're kind of exhausted. You're exhausted by the time you're just like, okay, they said yes. In our case, at that point, it had been 10 years. And the interest was really exciting for us. But we had also been in a spot before where people were interested and there were talks, but it fell apart for one reason or another. And in this case, it happened very decisively and quite quickly. We had set everything up, but it actually didn't feel real up until Netflix had See What's Next in Singapore. And I was in Jakarta with Shanti, where one of our offices is. And we were waiting for the announcement. And when we could tell, journalists that we knew, like, okay, you can start talking about it because there's an embargo. For the online press, there was no embargo. So once it started coming out, that's when it started to feel real. That's when it's just like, it's really happening. They announced it to the world. So it's not just closed quarters conversations, it's public. And so we looked at each other, literally, Shanti and I had like tears in our eyes. And I think that was the moment where we were like, we get to make this now. This is amazing.
And there was an audible gasp, right? From the
Yeah,
audience.
yeah. The publicity told me, like at the time, the people working in publicity, they're like, when they announced, and somebody I think wrote about it as well. The Filipino journalists weren't expecting it, and then when they flashed, and next up for Netflix original anime is from the Philippines, and it's TRESE, and they flashed this big slide of it, and apparently you could hear like a big gasp. And the marketing people now, like Criselda from Netflix was saying, they remember that time because they were like, we aren't prepared. So then they had to pivot and start. Because the reactions also, they weren't prepared for the reactions. It came fast and furious, and that was just the announcement. So can you imagine the lead up? But we were not expecting the memes to go back to that question.
Since this is more of like a creative industry talk, there's a lot of interest about adapting your intellectual property for the screen. What did you have any mandatories when Tanya approached you about potentially bringing it to the screen, and how did you protect your intellectual property?
So as Tanya said, it was a 10-year journey. So throughout every opportunity that came up, Tanya would talk to me and Kajo about it. So again, the original plan was to adapt it as a live action property. So whether there were discussions of, can it be a movie, can it be a TV series? So at every stage Tanya would say, okay, if we work with this producer or this studio, then it's going to look something like this. So very early on, me and Kajo had already prepared that there will be changes. How do you make it more appealing again to an international audience? Especially since the first couple of years, Tanya and Shanti were talking to studios in America. So by the time we got to talking to Netflix, in a way there was I can't really say it was a sigh of relief, but it was more of like, okay, great, now we can turn it into an anime because it can be really set in the Philippines, right? It can be really set in the Manila that we want it to be. And yeah, by that time, I think Tanya probably has memorized the TRESE pages more than I have. So they have really imbibed the storylines already. So that, again, by the time they started production, we just had that one day talk with Jay and the team. And Kajo got to spend a day with Jojo Aguilar about it. We knew, and since there were also other opportunities that came up in the past, that Tanya said, no, I don't think we should go for this offer. Even though I was like saying, but it looks good. Shouldn't we go for this offer? I was the one itching to just get it on screen. So I could really see, and again, Tanya and Shanti know, what is the best way to adapt this storyline. So by the time we got to talking to Netflix, I knew that we could, entrust the adaptation to them, especially when Jay Oliva came into the group. Knowing what he's done and me being a fan of what he's done, then so yeah, the creative process was really entrusting it to them because I knew that they had in a way, like, taken to heart what TRESE is all about.
Sorry, Tanya, what were those red flags?
For me, well, TRESE is special. And so we wanted to protect it. And really, for me and Shanti as producers, protecting the best part of your IP is a way of securing the quality of the IP and the longevity of the IP. So it's not just like a personal artistic choice or, as a producer, it's part of the value chain of your IP to preserve what is special about it, bringing it forward. So the red flags would be, especially for the live action, is it enough of a budget to get it done the way it should be done? Are the conditions right in terms of the partnership? Like, because we are creative producers, we want to make sure we have a hand in like shaping it because we're invested in it. It's our project, bringing it forward. So it's things like that where it's all about the protection of the quality. You don't want something that's pwede na or like, no, we'll do it for this budget and then bahala na, just let us do it. We couldn't have that, and it's a gamble for sure. We sat on it for certain, by passing on certain opportunities, we really wanted to make sure, and because it was part of our agreement with budget, it's our end of the bargain that you're entrusting us with your work. We promise you we will make it the best we possibly can. And so that was our end of the bargain.
An example of a red flag, which was one of my favorite moments, was and this was a meeting where I told Tanya about this meeting afterwards. So a local producer met with me, read TRESE, and then producer says, this will be a bigger hit if we give TRESE a boyfriend. She needs to have a love interest to make this a big hit to the masses. I was like saying, thank you very much. Tanya!
I'll go with you.
Did you have a lot of those meetings, those Filipino studio?
Now I think there were it ranges from the big studios to friends, of course, who were thinking of like, oh, maybe we can do this as a short film or something like that. But yeah, that was the most shocking one. Where it really you could really see that they were making big changes without fully understand, or they wanted to make big changes without fully understanding what the story was all about.
Yeah, I love that, Tanya, how you really kept to the spirit of TRESE. It's kind of different also though from the comic in many ways. So how did that process go? Did you tell budget like, I won't talk to you na for a year, and then also like what were the essential things that you decided to keep, and how did you go about making?
When we started talking to budget from the beginning, because I've had experience in terms of adaptation and talking to creators and seeing what comes from source material into like the finished product, whether it's like a film or a series. And I told Budget and Kaja from the beginning, you have to be emotionally prepared because you guys created this. Of course, it has a special place and there's a protectiveness you're going to feel about it. So if you partner with us, you have to let us know if it's something you're ready for it to morph. And to Budget and Kaja's credit, they were fearless. And Budget even said like, I want to see how other people will interpret it. They'll always have the books. And we told them, you'll always have the books to control the world how you want it. You just have to be emotionally prepared when it crosses over. And for us, I actually asked Budge, do you want to write on it? But it's a different process altogether. And it takes up a lot of time because he also had a day job and then a family that he was starting. So I said, this is kind of the realities of that. He's like, okay, you guys do it. I'll focus on the books. So when we did that, I made sure to keep them updated, but I also didn't want to inundate him because he didn't need to know the minutia. He just needed to see the significant points of where we were. And I was really grateful and always acknowledged their trust in us in terms of carrying it forward. So that was me, making sure, and Jay talks about it too, like he had ideas that he would pitch and I'd be like, wait. So I was like, hold up. Let me check if that fits with what we're trying to do in terms of the spirit of it.
How did he react when you said that TRESE should have a love interest?
Me? Or
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, with Jay? Well, look at the books. The books still have that thread.
Were there
that potential
did you have a list
thread.
of things that were like, this is TRESE, this cannot be
taken out. Yeah.
touched, yeah.
I don't know that it was a list, because the great thing too about Jay is he got it. He understood, what the source material was about, what was different about it. It's not just like a Batman Constantine copycat. Like, actually, the dynamics are actually quite different. So it wasn't about that. The discussions we had were really about the ride of the story, making sure that the ride of the story was exciting, and making sure that that still kind of fit into the spirit of it. So it was never really about taking away from the essence of the book, because Jay also himself says that, the one thing he wanted to do, the one thing he wanted to try to achieve was for people to think this is an extension of what Budget and Kajo created. It's just the stuff you haven't seen. So luckily we were all on the same page with that. I mean, like as Budge said, just don't make her have a talking cat and a yellow coat. I think we stuck to that.
I think that was the opening. That was the first thing I told them when I got to meet Jay, Mick, and Zig. So that was my joke. But yeah, I mean, it does feel like that they stuck to the core and essence of TRESE and just expanded on it, and that they would pick up on little cues that and then just expand on that. I mean, a line mentioned in one book suddenly becomes like a whole scene in the series. Or I'm amazed at how the few panels the Wind Tribe came out in, Hani and Ami, that they, the way Jay directed those two characters was exactly how I had them in mind. So it really goes to show how they looked at the book, dissected the book, and then and then adapted it. So yeah. So in other words, at no point does it feel like they've completely strayed away from the thought or essence of TRESE. It's really more of like suddenly decompressing some scenes and expanding on the characters or moments that we never got to spend time because we were always confined to that 20-page format of the book.
And just to add to that, the reason we stick to it is because you don't need to change it. I've worked on material where you really need to alter it for it to be adapted to like a live action or like a, anything that's moving picture. But for TRESE, that's also why I found it special, because the core of it was so adaptable. And then it was just a matter of mining the depths of what the hints were in there. You should see my book 3, Budge. It's so, like, how the spine is like gone, but I still hold on to it because that's the one I was poring over. But basically, it's all loose leaf at this point.
You need a new. We'll send you a new copy.
I have. I ordered it now. It has a sticker. I'm so excited.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. New art. The sticker. I have it.
And your afterword in it too.
Oh, really? I didn't check that yet. I have to check that.
Wow.
Yep.
So-
the new book 3 has afterwards from Tanya and Shanti. So just to commemorate this year.
Yeah, actually. And I read book 3 first. I know we talked about it before, but actually when I picked up the 3 books, I read book 3 first and it gave me the origin. So then it's like, okay, this is great. And I talked to Budge and he said, Budge, this is great. The origin story is fantastic. He's like, what? You read book 3? Wait, that was book 3? Clearly did not look at the spine.
No.
But this is with the updated art also, or not?
No, this is like before. This is when I
Okay.
first talked to Budget, when I cold called him and said, can I talk to you about your book? From random stranger chick.
Do the new editions have the
one with
number on the
afterword.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
The afterword is with the new, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yep. And the new editions coming out from Avenida, our new old publisher, has the updated art. So and especially book 3, Kajo uses most of the artwork that was used from Book of Murders. So it's so yes, updated art, simply put, without geeking out on the details.
When is it coming out?
Book 3 just came out.
It's out.
Ah,
So just came out this month. So we really wanted it to come out, to have books 1, 2, and 3 available again, at least for Filipino audiences. So they can easily, after watching the show,
They can read it, yeah.
add to cart.
Yes.
Well, actually, if I could, jump onto that a bit, how about having the book published internationally in the wake of more I guess, awareness of the property.
So what happened there was we are now published by Ablaze, which is a brand new comic book company. And they're actually, the editors and publishers are veterans from Dark Horse and from Dynamite Comics. And Rich Young and his partners decided to set up Ablaze. And their main editorial line is they want to bring foreign comic books to the United States. So their initial lineup are European graphic novels, manga, and manhwa. And thanks to the announcement of Netflix that particular month, that's how TRESE got onto Ablaze's radar.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that was the same time me and Kajo were doing the Indiegogo project, where Kajo decided to redraw the entire first issue, right? So when Ablaze called up or emailed us, we were able to show them the new pages and the updated pages. So it was a pretty easy pitch to them, because they said, we heard about this, can we take a look at your stories? How many stories do you have? So we essentially sent them the first 3 books and said, we've already done 6 more here in the Philippines. So that started that relationship with Ablaze. And as of, I think, even before the show started, the first print run of book 1 got sold out. So we're now on schedule, and before the end of the year, we will have books 1, 2, and 3 available through Ablaze in the US, as well as any comic book store around the world that orders from previews.
Have you gone to La Cigare de Faro?
At Cigarer, I had one of the Pinoys who went to the store a couple of months ago. I said, can you ask them if they've got copies? Just to pretend there's demand for it. So yeah, they didn't have it, but hopefully after all this news about the anime, that they'll order.
I mean, that's the thing to think about, and it's what I told Budget before, is that adapting something, and if we're lucky enough to get a bigger market, I mean, locally, yeah, it would still, like, if we set something up where locally it would cross over to people who aren't into comics. But that is also the benefit of adapting a work into another medium that's maybe can cross over beyond their core market. So for the creative industry, there's value in that, and there's also value for other properties. Let's say for the Philippines, for the IP for the Philippines, Nida was telling me that some creators are getting inquiries from foreign publishers. So it's a good ripple effect. But you have to make something good so that the ripple effect is good. When you make a bad thing, the ripple effect can also be bad.
But Tanya, what do you think makes the comic book adaptation so attractive nowadays? Since it's source material now for producers and beyond superheroes too.
Yeah, well, it has before. When I was working in LA, it was pre-Marvel, like the whole phase 1 of Marvel. But comic books are basically storyboards, and you can see if you're used to reading something and seeing it for the story, the comic book makes it a little bit easier to visualize it and see what it could be. But you still need to have an eye or an idea of where you're going to take it, what market you're going to do it for, what platform, what genre or media or format you're going to do it for, whether it's a series or a film or an anime. There's some critical thinking in assessing what that needs to be, because you can't remake every comic book. You can't remake every story that you see adapted for like another medium. That's why it just depends. It really depends on the kind of story it is, the quality of the story, which is why I got really excited when I saw TRESE. I was like, this is something you easily can see as like a live action or a story that's on screen.
Cassandra, you've been a producer in Hollywood, you've been a producer here in the Philippines, but this was definitely a very different project from what you've been used to, right? So what is the biggest thing you've learned throughout the whole process of TRESE becoming an animated series?
It's an interesting question because I've learned, this whole process has been a learning experience. But I think the biggest lesson is probably how passionate Filipinos can get about a work or a project to these levels, in terms of like embracing it, crossing borders, crossing, generation gaps. If it's something really good and it's something that connects with them, I feel it's the whole thing where you're looking at the industry now, like maybe theatrical or series, where people talking about the decline of attendance or ratings. I think the hunger is there. The hunger of the audience is there. It's just that maybe we're not giving them something that sparks their interest. So we were hoping TRESE would do that, and we're happy that they like it. But the takeaway is like, oh, when they like something and really like something, that means something. So that's a good building block to bolster up the rest of the industry in figuring that out. It's a puzzle, and I love puzzles. So figuring out, okay, then what other stories are good to come forward, and that's what we hope. We hope, like other creators, try to think about this connecting with the audience as well, so that every effort that we do really builds up an entire industry, and that's something to work towards.
Budget, what was your favorite thing about the show that surprised you that wasn't from the comics?
The moments when they what do you call this? Strayed away from the story in the comic, but yet stayed close to what the theme of the story was. So what comes to mind is episode 3, which is the Chanak story, and it's and how they took what the plot points and the character arc of the Nova Aurora character, or in the comic books it was the Heather character, right? But still gave it a twist. The plot, I could see that they were inspired by. They took, for example, the moment in the courtroom where the Nova Aurora character gives her best performance in the courtroom, and transplanted that and made it that scene with her and the Chanak. So it was surprising for me that it's one of those moments of like, that never happened in the comic book, but wow, this is it's such a powerful scene. And I read that scene in script form because Tanya let me read the script at that point, and even in the script, I gasped at that moment where it was describing that end scene, right? So, and yeah, to see it finally in the show was just had a bigger impact, the way they executed it. And that's just one example, and I could pinpoint other examples throughout the different episodes, but it's those moments when even I get surprised at how did they take a different approach to the story, but they actually again stuck to the essence of what that case was all about.
But I wanted to know how so comic books being like a source material for a lot of movie and TV productions, I wanted to know how this has changed the process of comic book creation. Like, do comic creators now have adaptation in mind, and how do they create stories now, or is it still mostly the same?
I think you could easily spot I think for comic book geeks, let me put it that way, they could easily spot a graphic novel that looks like a storyboard, right? What was that Bruce Willis movie? There was a Bruce Willis movie. It was kind of, it was set in the future. I think there were cyborgs. No.
Fifth Element.
No, not
No,
Fifth Element.
that wasn't based.
Red?
So yeah, definitely, it was like a medium hit. But so I then discovered, it's based on a comic book. So I bought the comic book, and when I got it, I get that that feeling in my stomach of like, oh, the guy just made a storyboard for his film, right? So I think that as far as especially local comic book creators, I think it's still best that we focus on making a good comic book, and leave the adaptation up to people like Tanya and Jay to adapt it in the best way possible. I've also heard of stories where somebody has a film script and then they approach a comic book creator and say, "Can you make this into a comic book?" And they're not prepared for those changes. So I think it's really hard when you're trying to do one thing and you're already assuming how it will get adapted into that other medium. Whether it's comics to film or film to comics, something needs to change, or else you will, as a reader, you will immediately notice that they have other intentions for this, and the storytelling just doesn't properly flow. So yeah, I think, especially for the current base of comic book creators we've got, I think it's great that they are focusing on telling a good story through panels and pages. And eventually, I'm sure if they get adapted, then it's best to again partner with people who already know what they're going to do or how to best execute it.
Awesome. Okay, we have a new guest who just joined us, and I'm super excited. I've never met this man,
yeah.
but I'm very I admire his work. Storyboard artist, director, of course, of so many great DC originals, and of course, a showrunner and director of TRESE. Please welcome everybody, Mr. Jay Oliva. Yeah. Hey, Jay.
Thanks, guys. Sorry, I'm a little
Hey,
late.
that is a great camera, man. Like you look so good.
I know, in-camera blur.
It's
Yeah.
it's the director in me. I need to have a nice camera with a nice.
What lessons or insights did you get from adapting something that in a way was pretty much done by two people initially, right, from the comic?
Well, I mean, I've adapted a lot of comic books and graphic novels in the past. I mean, I've worked on toys from He-Man to Winnie the Pooh for Disney, and of course all the DC and Marvel stuff. So I've worked on different IPs and how to translate it to to animation. For this one, I mean, it was a little easy in a sense that I mean, easy and hard, right? It was easy because the source material had been out for a while, and there's they've got the huge library of different novels. I think at the time they had seven different volumes at the time. And then what I did was I read everything I could. I did a little research, and then I tried to do my best to try to figure out, okay, what do I like about the comic? What do I like about the characters? And then of course, talking to Budget and Kajo, I tried to figure out ask them the big questions of okay, well, in your mind, what does Alexander Trese sound like? Or what like with Kajo, with the artwork, adapting. And so I would then adjust it as and then with the adaptation and try to find something that is that'll please the fans, but at the same time be something kind of new. So that's where it's fun, but it's also a little scary because you never know how the fans are going to react. And of course, my biggest critics I wanted to make sure I pleased was Budget and Kajo, to make sure that they like it. And I'm constantly even Kajo, who hadn't seen the show, I kept asking him, "Does it look okay to you?"
And now you know it works because of all the fan art, especially all the.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of fan art. Yeah.
Thirst art, erotic.
I know. Oh my
fan
goodness.
art.
Has the reaction online surprised you? Do you have a favorite meme or response that you've seen?
Oh, the thing for me was just the overwhelming response from the Philippines and the Filipino fans. They take their Trese very seriously. I think the one thing that I didn't realize until as you start doing the press junkets, I'm seeing more and more posts, is just how everybody thought everybody on the show was sexy, they were just sexy. And I mean, I'll admit, I mean, I wanted to make the Kambal and Alex, and of course Maliksi, both versions. I wanted to make sure that they're very good looking models, but the other characters I didn't plan on, like Tapia, I didn't go out trying to make him sexy.
Yes.
But
He's got a fan base now.
Exactly.
It's that one moment where he shows up with a shotgun and he's got blood and the
On his
smirk on his face. Everyone's like, Yes, Tapia,
Yes.
come through.
Um, yeah, so that I didn't expect. And then it wasn't until they started putting the lineups up of like the different characters. Like, of course, Dominic. For me, I remember my
The song
character.
Prince.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So Dominic's in the comic, right? And so
Yes,
I
yes.
loved his swag in the comic. I thought he was really cool. And so in the scenes that we have him in the comic and in the animation, I wanted him to have like a really unique outfit. I basically based him on the vampire Lestat, right? I wanted that sexiness of the vampire Lestat.
Right.
But his coat, I wanted it to be like Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heartthrob Band, where it's that short kind of coat, but he's not wearing anything underneath. And I remember one of my character designers, Sarah, she had designed it, and he had a more revolutionary coat, right, with the tail like a revolutionary. And I was like, no. I was like, you got to open it up, and he had like a little like fluffy pirate shirt underneath. I was like, no, lose the shirt. I want to see like the whole abs and everything. And yeah, that's what you see there. And it just ended up being, because I just thought, for him being the Aswang Prince, I wanted him to be very flamboyant and just like over the top. And like I said, I was basing him off of the Vampire Lestat. And so anyways, when you look at the other characters, I realized, oh yeah, we did make a lot of really attractive.
Maliksi for one, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, we had, Manny Jacinto, and I was like, okay, I got to make sure. And also, that's also could be a possible love interest, right? In the comics, there's definitely a love interest there. So I had to make sure that he was that bad boy that everybody kind of like. They love to hate, but hate to love, right? And it's that whole little Alexandra go for the forbidden fruit,
Jay,
That
I'm already getting comments like, "Oh, Maliksi in the anime is so much better than Maliksi in the comic book," and they're like comparing characteristics, and it's crazy.
The debates are hilarious sometimes.
Yes, but you know what? The fan interaction of that is what I think is something that a show like this really needs. I think it's one thing to have good ratings from the critics and good ratings with people watching it, but I think the fan engagement is where I did not expect it to go this far.
Same.
I mean, I was seeing cosplayers the night of it release, and they're dressing up as the Talagbusao and somebody and I'm just like,
Yes.
how did you guys put together
from the
that
trailer?
so fast, right? And I think the one thing that really stood out to me was just the overwhelming fan response from the Philippines, which was really amazing.
If I may ask a more craft-specific question, right? The main difference between the comics and, of course, the TV show is motion. And one of the things that I was curious about were your influences about how you executed the style of the show, not just in terms of the visual look, but in terms of the camera movement, the mise en scène. Could you speak to that a bit?
I've been really unique in my career. A lot of animation directors tend to work on a combination of action, adventure, and cartoony type of animation programs. Just to give you an example, about 90 to 95% of animated content in America is all the cartoony, like Adventure Time. It's all that kind of that vein, right? My career has been mostly, for the most part, action adventure from the moment I started to now, right? So early on, when I first started working in animation in the mid '90s, of course, we had Batman the Animated Series, but most of the animated programs at the time were still shot kind of like, it was almost like sitcom, right? There was like the camera was eye level. Very rarely did you have, dynamic camera moves. But because I grew up with, Japanese anime, right? I loved Akira and Ghost in the Shell. I mean, I'm a kid from the '90s, so a lot of those Japanese anime influenced me. So when I started working, I kept trying to do these things, and my bosses kept saying, no, we don't want that anime stuff. Just stick to what the style of the show is. Of course, as things progressed on, it changed, and they wanted a little bit more live action feel. And so that's where I was able to really excel because, the way I stage things is very, very live action. I mean, that's why when I started working with Zack Snyder and doing all of the Marvel films as well, I just fit in, right? Because the shots that I was doing, the camera work, it was very live action feel. So like for this particular project, I already had a background of trying to shoot things very live action. I mean, I think you could probably take our episodes and be able to shoot it in live action, and you pretty much could follow it, exactly, and it would still feel, the same. So I think that's the one thing that I wanted to focus on was get that live action feel, get that film noir, that was in the comic, get that police procedural. Like I love all the Law and Orders and all of those kind of police procedural, like True Detective and stuff. I love those kind of things. So being able to put all these kind of fun, kind of different things that interest me into the kind of the filmmaking and the show, that's just went hand to hand. Now watching the show now, 2 years after we originally started it, there's a lot of things I would change. I'm thinking, oh man, I'm in my mind, I'm like, man, if I get a second season, if we get another, I mean, the stuff that I want to do cinematography wise and lighting and everything, I think has grown a lot, and I can't wait that if I ever get the opportunity to do that, like it's gonna go crazy. Like I want to basically have scenes where like you're just scared, like really, really scared. Like Conjuring scared, right? Like, like when you watch The Conjuring, you're just like, man, this is terrifying. Like, you want to turn it off. I'm hoping we can get a chance in if we do get other episodes where we can explore that a bit more and kind of really work on, the kind of pacing and the horror aspect of Alexandra's world, which is one thing that I wish we just had a little bit more time with. So that's what I would do.
I mean, for me, it was a great front seat to watch how Jay and Jojo and all the, the artists work on it. And seeing the show from the beginning stages where they're doing like, the storyboards and then putting it together in animatics. And then when they start doing the backgrounds and the artwork, and then finally the animation, like each stage had something fascinating to look at. But there's so much work actually that goes into the series that Jay explained to me, because I told him the lighting, like every frame, like the frame I have, the frame you have, Quark, or even in like, to say the basement in like episode 3, it feels different. And I asked Jay once, like, why is that? He's like, because we pay attention to the lighting for each scene. They don't do like a flat lighting for like everything throughout. They actually model it with each scene. And I'm like, that is a lot of work, but that's what comes across. And that's also what makes the series super special.
Jay, do you have favorite shots in the series?
Oh, there's a lot of them. I mean, I think, I mean, a lot of the shots that I did, I like a lot.
Of course.
I think, like for example, like I remember, my publicity guy Gary was pulling some shots to kind of share with the, for the different articles, and there's this one shot he pulled of Alexandra going into Signor's Armana's is the tree, like she's walking up and there's this tree behind her. It's a shot where it's over the shoulder of her and you see the tree. I thought that looked really, really great. It was all very like kind of cool, blues. There's so many things that I loved. I mean, I love like the reveal of the Chanak when the camera, the light finds it and it like its head turns around and it screams. That I thought was pretty cool. There's a lot of things there's a lot of little shots here and there that I liked. There's a scene where Malixi's, during the race in episode 2 where he's running away from camera. Just as I think the shot is that Alexandra's car comes away from camera and it skids to a stop here, and then Malixi comes running in the shot, and it really looks great. It looks great. And originally this is a funny story. Originally my director, one of my directors, David Hartman, he was like, we should cut this shot. I'm like, why? They're like, because you could see Malixi's butthole. And I'm like, I was like, but I like that. Keep that in there.
And Slate exclusive.
And I was just like, no, leave it. Like, that's a good shot. Like, leave it. But anyways, I mean, there's a lot of imagery. I think a lot of the things that I loved. I mean, again, I would say one of the imagery that I really love, that I'm glad that I grabbed it from the book and I put it in, is the image of, it's from, I think, 13 Stations, when all the Aswang are feeding on the people on the tables, right? And it is kind of a down shot that Kajo had drawn. And I remember when I saw that image, I was like, I have to put this in the movie. I have to put this in the animation somewhere. So I think that there's a lot of things that Kajo had done and Budget had done that I was like, let's just lift that. That's perfect, right? That's kind of where my mindset was, because again, there's a ton of really cool stuff. I really like a lot of the Bolete tree stuff, like where Alex is heading to the Bolete tree, and even at the end when she's standing in front of it, the very last shot, and also the pagoda shot, right, where the
Yes.
capital pagoda where the Chinese vampire is up on the top. So that's oh, by the way, that funny story with that is that Tanya, like, she took us around Quiapo, and mind you, I'd never been to Quiapo before. We went
Much less walking on it on foot.
Yeah, we did it on foot, right? We saw the Quiapo River, a very interesting river, and then we went to where the pagoda was, and I remember it was so weird because it's like, you see all the different buildings, and you come around this corner, and there's this Japanese pagoda in the middle. Like, what is this doing here? And I just thought, this is so amazing. And I turned to Tanya. I was like, there has to be a reason we have to put this. And then, yeah, it made it for the ending. And it was a great kind of set piece to set up for the last shot.
Yeah, because Jay, you've adapted so many cool things. Of course, Stress, you did such a great job there. But my favorite book of all time is the Dark Knight Returns. And you've done so much IP adaptation, Green Lantern, Batman, the Justice League. What would your advice be for other directors, producers, and writers looking to adapt IP?
Directing IP is a really interesting process, because here's the thing: is that, like, if you do it 1-1 to the source, then you run into the problem where people are used to it, and there's nothing to be excited about because they already know the story, right? They know what's going to happen. On the other hand, though, the fans, they want that. So when I do my adaptations, I try to do a thing where it's mostly the same, but there's a lot of new stuff. Like, for example, Dark Knight Returns, there's a lot of new scenes I added that, reading these key moments of the cases, I was like, okay, this is really cool. Let's make sure we use that. Or hey, let's take this story point and move it around over here and see if we can connect the dots. And I think my process is like, it's a little scatterbrained. What I like to do is I get everything, I put it in front of me, and I kind of let my brain connect all the threads, and then I start playing it in my head. I actually see it in my head, kind of like Mystery Science Theater, and I play it over and over and over. And as it starts working, I'll start to feel my heart kind of, race a bit. And because when that happens, I realize that I'm being inspired. And when I come up with something that's inspired, then I know it's a good idea, right? Because a lot of times I'm just like, okay, Batman's fighting a ninja. Okay, yeah, that's fine. What does he do? Like, how do we make that interesting, right? But when I figure something out, I'm like, oh, wait, Batman jumps through the car, like into the car and out the car because the car is falling at the same time. Then I'm like, okay, that's a cool idea. Let's put that in there. So, there's a lot of moments in TRESE where, like for example, like Hank showing up, like after knowing that he's gonna go see Nova Aurora, right? When the next time you see him, he's all dressed up in his 1970s like garb, and he's just like, and him spraying, the cologne. That was something that I was just like, oh, that's a fantastic scene. That is just so hilarious. It's so fun, right? And also, the idea that Crispin and Basilio have no clue about how windows, open in a car that old, and they're trying to push it, going, why isn't this opening? And that when those ideas come out, that you've hit magic, right? And so when you adapt something, you really have to take into account to what you like yourself, but also what the fans like, what they're responding, what they're talking about on the forums, or things that they, moments in the comic or in their IP that they love a lot, and then you try to do that, and you do that justice, and you take it just a little bit step further, or you take it to a different area that they haven't quite seen before, or a different angle, and that way, if the fans who know what's coming, they'll be like, wait, this is different. I didn't see this. To tie up my answer really quick at the end what I wanted to do, and I told this to Tanya, by the time you get to the end of episode 5, I wanted the fans to be like, where is this going? Because this isn't following the comics, right? Like, I wanted, when episode 6 came about, I wanted them to be like, I don't know how, and then everyone's seen this show, right? So when we did the the thing with Cap G, that was going to be a big surprise. Like I wanted them to not expect that because you don't expect that happening. But we wanted to kind of subvert what people's expectations are, right? But what was funny is that the way that I ended the show, right, which is the Talibusao being trapped, is in the same spirit of what Budget and Kaijo had done, where in the original comic he was being trapped in a video game, a massive multiplayer video game. And we even dropped that hint early on when Jobert is talking about Eternos 4.0 or something. So the fans were falling around like, "Oh, we know how this is going to end."
Right.
It's gonna get, you know.
Yeah.
But what's funny, and I credit Budget to this, is that like he had already established these dragon gates, right? This way of traveling, and so when Tanya and I and the writer were thinking about like, okay, now how are we gonna do the Eternos thing? Like and I was just like, no, the dragon gates, right? Because you just fall perpetually, and plus it's also I don't know if this is where you got some of the inspiration from. It reminded me of the Robert Jordan series, The Wheel of Time. There's this way that they travel, which is in between, like you travel in between in between these gates. But if you fall forever, and you can't, and you just like you die from just falling, never hitting anything, and it's like a fate worse than death, and so when I heard when we were talking about the dragon gates and everything, I was like, that's what it is, because the idea is that the Talibusao, he can't influence anything. He's stuck in this dragon gate, and there's no way for him to get out, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's kind of how we do it, how I do the adaptations in a very convoluted way.
One last question for our three creatives here. What do you think? Do you have any advice for Filipino creatives out there who want their IP adapted? And any thoughts on the future of the Philippine creative industry and how we can improve it? It's a two-pronged question, so just choose any prong that you want.
I think my advice would be, artists cannot exist in a bubble. They can't just expect to just do the art for their. I mean, you can do art for yourself if you want. Like, definitely that's definitely an option. But if your goal is to really want to have it be seen by more people, you really have to look at the big picture and see, who is the audience you want to connect with, how do you want to connect with them? Because then that informs, how you want to find partners to set up your art, to either adapt it to another platform or another medium, or even just get it out there for the most part. So my advice would be, focus on being the best you can be with the content, telling the best story you can, but at the same time, look at the big picture in terms of where the market is, where the industry is, who the people you should be talking to are, whether it's to get information or maybe partner up, because all of that will serve you if your goal is to, have it adapted to something else.
Simplest, I guess, is if you are a comic book creator, then focus on your craft, tell the best story you want to tell, start telling your story and then finish telling your story, and don't fall into the endless pit of revising it, thinking it will become, I will revise this until this is perfect, kind of pitfall, right? Finish your story and then move on to the next story. And then, as far as adaptation is concerned, then a new mindset is needed. A more collaborative, more open mindset is needed. A good dialogue is needed between you and your partners and the people who will adapt it. And you will feel it in your gut if these people you're partnering with understand what your story is all about. And to be not afraid to walk away if you feel like they're not understanding what you wanted it to be.
Good answer. Okay, I would say let me jump on this. So I've got a couple of things I would want to touch upon. So here's the thing: is that like as an artist, I'm very lazy. Okay, I'm very lazy. Like I don't like. If I had a choice between drawing and sleeping, I'm choosing sleeping every time. And again, this is where the creative process, kind of runs into how creatives are, right? There are some creatives that are very driven who can be like, I'm going to do 1 page a day or do this, this, and this, right? by and large, most artists are scatterbrained. Most creatives are very scatterbrained. And both artists and writers, which are creatives, we get into creative blocks, right? And we constantly feel like we suck, right? I mean, not some great terms. I even run into problems where I run into walls. But like what Tanya was saying is that just do it, right? In my storyboard class, I tell my students, when I'm storyboarding, I hate everything I draw, right? But what I do is that, I just plow through it as fast as I can, because it's easier to go back and look at the shot and realize what's wrong than to just stare at a blank page, right? And so what I tell my students is that you just vomit out your shots. Just vomit it out. Get to the end, right? And this is my advice is just do it, right? Just do it. And even though you may feel like it's not the best that you can, just do it, because you know what? Once it's done, right, you can always go back and revise it. But what Budget was saying, and this is my other point, is go on to something else, right? I work with a lot of writers, a lot of new writers, a lot of like veteran writers, and what I tell the new writers is just like, listen, we're working on this, just get it done to the point where I'm happy with it. You know what? And let's write like 5 more scripts. And if I hear that somebody's interested in that first script, we'll go back and we'll relook at it again, and then we'll revise it, right? But the thing is that like you'll get better and better as you go along, right? The first thing you draw or the first thing you write, you're gonna hate, and that's okay, right? But the thing is don't fall in love with it to the point where you want to keep revising that same thing over and over. It's best to like, kind of stretch your muscles and try something else, right? Like, one of the things I like to do is I read a lot of books, I watch a lot of movies, I'm interested in any kind of story. So I'm spending my time a lot of times, trying to kind of, broaden my kind of my writing muscle, so that I can understand when I'm talking to writers where they're kind of leading to. Because a lot of times they have A, B, and C stories, and a lot of times I need to help them to make sure that those different character arcs, story arcs, all kind of wrap up in a nice, clean way. And the only way you get that is, again, you read a lot of stories, and you get ideas that way, like, oh, that reminds me of this thing. Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. So the one thing that I recommend is kind of, when you're out of school, you're only as good as you want to be, right? So, for example, like I took, for the longest time I was drawing, but I didn't really know too much about writing. So I took the Robert McKee story seminars and genre stuff. I went to his seminars. I wanted to be better as a writer. I wanted to be better as an artist, so I would take other classes. So the thing is, for all these up and coming creatives, don't be afraid to try to get better, right? Like take classes, talk to other writers, hone your craft, whether you're an artist or a writer or any kind of creative, get really good at it. Because remember, if you're a professional and you want to get paid for it, you have to have your skills to the highest level as possible, and that'll just lead to your longevity, in the industry. And that's the one thing that, again, like back to my point in the beginning, is that I'm lazy. I want to sleep, right? I want to play video games. I want to go hang out with my friends. I want to do all these other things. But the thing is, if you want to be a creative, you have to sacrifice certain things. There's a lot of things. I started when I was 19. I've been working longer than I've been enjoying life, right? But that's the price creatives pay, is that you have to, and I say this in my class, I die a little with every storyboard that I do, because I put so much of myself into it. I put so much, like, I don't just turn it off at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. in the day. Like, I'm 4 a.m, I'm thinking, oh, that'd be a cool fight sequence, right? I'm on the train, I'm getting my car serviced, and I'm constantly thinking about the stories or kind of new things, either on a project that I'm working on currently or something that I have after that. Jackie Chan carries around a book where he just writes down ideas of just like, hey, it'd be kind of cool doing a fight in a supermarket, or he just writes down random things But when he goes to do his films, a lot of times he'll go back into that book and he'll be like, "Hey, this is a good idea here," and he weaves his story around the stunt work or the ideas that he has for the the action. And I believe Miyazaki does the same thing. I think he, from what I read, he did that with Kiki's Delivery Service. He had drawn Kiki, and he just didn't know where that went. But then years later, he looked at it again, and he started like, wait, I think there's a story here, right? And I think as a creative, you have to kind of open your mind and your time to know that you might be developing multiple storylines at the same time, right? You might be like, hey, I got this story about a unicorn. Hey, I got this story about this, police procedural, and oh shoot, I have this other idea about this. Don't be afraid to kind of like jump around a little bit, right? And again, but at some point, pick one that you have the most ideas about, finish it, and then jump to the other ones, right? Because that, again, it's all practice. The more practice you do, the better you get. And my last advice is, don't expect to be great right off the get-go, right? Like when I first started, I was terrible. Right? But the more you do it, the better you're gonna get, right? I mean, when I go over my students' work or my storyboard artists' work who are younger than me, and I look at the shot and I'm already like, no, do this, this, and this. They look at me like, I just created magic, right? They're like, how? They're like, they told me I spent hours staring at this drawing, not knowing how to do this, and now you figured it out in 2 seconds. And I said, well, I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, when you've done it as long as me, of course, it should take you a few seconds.
Thanks, Jay. And we are just joined by Alexandra TRESE herself. Hi, Liza.
Hi, Liza.
Sorry, I came in a bit late. I'm at work right now.
No worries. Good to see you.
I came in.
Good to see you.
Ramon, maybe you have a question for Liza since she's joining us.
Oh wait, 1 second.
He wasn't expecting that. He's on the spot.
Yeah.
Surprise!
I saw that.
Surprise!
Surprise! Liza's here.
Shocked by Liza's beauty. Natameme ka doon, Ramon.
that part with my questions for Liza, I scrolled past na pala. But I guess the first one that comes to mind is, what did you find most attractive about the character and most challenging about the experience?
What I found most attractive about the character would be the fact that she's a detective. I've always wanted to play a character that's really different from any other character that I've ever portrayed before. And I have a fascination with detectives and crimes. Like I like to watch true crime and other sorts of entertainment of that genre. So I guess the story itself, her being a detective and the fact that it's based on mythology, I'm a huge fan of nonfiction. So I fell in love with the comics as soon as I read everything. Actually, as soon as I read like the first few pages of the first book, I got so excited.
How was your I guess relationship or interaction with the directors regarding how to sculpt the performance?
Well, I only got to meet with Jay once. We had a Zoom meeting with the producers, Miss Tanya, and with Jay, and we kind of went over what they were expecting from me. And I had asked them what they wanted me, like my character, to sound like. At first I had assumed that they wanted me to sound something like Shay, so I did a lot of research and I started watching a lot of her previous projects so I could kind of copy her voice. But then as soon as I told them that, they told me that they didn't want me to sound anything like her, and that they wanted me to create a character on my own. But they did tell me that one of their inspirations would be Batman.
So did you start out first saying, "Kumusta na, no?" Doing the Batman voice? But I guess how did you build the character? Your interpretation of the character lies where did you look at other characters that you felt would be familiar, similar, or maybe even your older characters that you've played? How did you kind of like sculpt how you would approach Alexandra?
I watched a lot of different animations on Netflix, just so I can see like how that world works. Like I wanted to get inspiration, not necessarily on how my character would sound, but just like how people come up with these different voices in general. And I also did watch a lot of superhero movies, and I watched a lot of voice acting training on YouTube.
Okay, last question from me. From me, Liza, what are your hopes and dreams for Alexandra Tressa moving forward if you are given a season 2?
Ooh, what are my hopes and dreams for Alexandra Tresse? I hope, well, for Alexandra, maybe for myself, I hope to learn more about her backstory. I want to know more about like what happened to her mom, where her siblings are. She has 4 brothers, and we didn't see like we only saw a short glimpse of them when they were at the balete tree, but we didn't really get to hear about their backstory. So I want to know a little bit more about that. But my hopes and dreams for Alexandra is that she finds, I guess, some sort of inner peace within herself, because I can imagine going through like what she goes through every day, battling out these aswangs, all these creatures that are wreaking havoc in Manila. It could be pretty draining on her, and I just hope that she has like some sort of, like I said, peace. I hope she attains that in the future, and that she can live a more happier, selfish kind of life, because she's very selfless. She gives anything and everything to the people of Manila and also to the people she loves. And so I feel like she, after a while, after giving so much of yourself out, there's nothing left for herself. So yeah, that's my hopes and dreams for her.
Thanks so much for joining us, Liza. And guys, this is we're just wrapping up the first part of our panel. Liza, I know you have to go; you're in a shoot, but thanks so much for giving us your time. And I guess we'll just segue to the anatomy of a scene with all our creators.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye, Liza. See you.
Okay, guys, we've come to the part of our panel where we ask the TRESE creatives, that's Jay, Budget, and Tanya, to break down some key scenes in episode 1 for all of us. Here we go.